John Emery.
Doug Regaller.
Ruth Holstrom. Anuprit Minhas.
Mike, I think you're muted.
Mike, are you in?
There we are. Okay. Yep, I'm here.
All right.
Thank you. And this is Carol Spencer. I'm chair of the commission. You should have before you a copy of the proposed agenda for this evening. May I have a motion to approve that agenda?
I'm making a motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the prepared agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, please say nay. The approved the agenda passes. Thank you. Also, in your packet, you should have the minutes of the November 18, 2020 meeting. Are there any corrections or additions to those draft minutes?
This is Mike Clayton. Just a note that although I was technically absent, I heard the whole meeting.
In fact, Mike, I think you did join us later, didn't you?
No, actually, I was there for the whole thing, but you just didn't. You couldn't hear me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, we're glad you were there. Thank you. We'll make that adjustment. Any other corrections or additions? If not, I'd accept a motion to approve the minutes of November 18, 2020.
This is Ruth Holstrom. I would move to approve.
Do I have a second?
This is Doug. Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the corrected proposed minutes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, please say nay. Minutes are approved. Now our agenda calls for a public forum. Is there anyone who would like to speak on an item this evening before the commission that is not on the agenda? Do you have anyone, Kelly, waiting to speak?
I do not believe so in the public forum. I think we have speakers for other items.
All right, thank you very much. In that case, let's move to agenda item number 6. This is the public hearing for major site development plan amendment for the Domani Planned Residence District at 2200 Oakwood Road. Would staff, Benjamin, are you the one that's going to review this for us?
Yes.
Thank you. Would you go ahead?
Yeah. Good evening, Commission. Let me just pull up the map here for reference. Okay. Just zoom out here so we can see. There we go. Okay, so this is the Domani property at 2200 Oakwood Road that you will remember from several months ago. The property boundaries are the same. The zoning now is Planned Residence District. The applicant is requesting to make some changes to some of the setbacks in the Planned Residence District. The layout is the same, the phasing is the same, the drainage is the same, utilities, number of lots, number of homes, everything is the same. It's the setbacks that we are discussing here tonight. The applicant originally proposed 0 lot line setbacks, which is not something, which is a development model that exists throughout the country, but it has not been done in Ames previously. And so we don't have a specific zoning district for it. So the applicant requested the PRD. In further discussions after council approved the PRD, staff and the applicant came to understand that several things needed to be clarified. One of those things was porches on the front of the houses. There had been, further discussion, further examination of the house plans made clear that there were porches that planned to extend beyond what we had set the setbacks. The zoning ordinance does allow for the ordinary projection of setbacks by 8 feet, but we just hadn't addressed it specifically in this PRD. Another issue that arose was in further discussions with our inspections division and with the building official. The building official said that she would be more comfortable having the entirety of the house on one lot. And where that comes into conflict with the buildings is with the eaves. So the building wall on the 0 lot line side would abut one property line, but then the eaves would hang over, which is a model that does exist in other places. The building official said she would prefer, she and her team would prefer to have it all on one lot. And so that is the impetus behind this request here. There's a detailed chart on the bottom of page 2 and beginning of page 3 in the staff report that lays out what all of the setbacks are. And you'll notice that there are several exceptions, and let's go. We're going to look at some of them really quickly. The lot 22 and 23 are called out there several times. Lot 22 is where the model home is. And the foundation has been poured for lot 22. And the one exception, so the changes to the zoning is basically shifting all of the houses over 1.5 feet on the lots. So 1.5 feet to count for all of the possible eave. But the distances between the homes will remain, which is 10 feet. 10 feet is a standard in the building code and building codes across the country of distance between buildings, between dwellings. If homes are closer than 10 feet, then you have to fire rate the buildings. Because of the fact that the foundation for lot 22 has already been poured, the applicant has agreed to fire rate the walls for the homes on lot 22 and 23. And then the homes on the corners were clarified, their setbacks. And then the houses down at the corner of Green Hills Drive and Cottonwood Road here, this is actually rotated. The north is to the east there, or to the right there, had smaller setbacks in the original zoning, and so then those were clarified further as well in the new standards. Also, as a follow-up to this, several of the lot lines will be moved by a few feet here and there, and I can take any questions that you might have.
Before we do that, is a representative of the applicant here tonight?
Yes, the applicant and the applicant's engineer are both here.
Okay, great. Then let's have, unless the applicant wants to make further presentation.
So yeah, we'll allow the applicant to speak, Carol, and then
That would be great.
public comment. Okay. So Mr. Artisan, I'm going to unmute you, and you are open to speak if you like.
I don't feel like it's necessary for me to waste the commission's time this evening. I would just say that what we're asking for here are procedural changes, not conceptual changes, and it's just some things that you run into when you're trying something new. But the concept is the same. What we're trying to do is the same, and I'm perfectly fine with some of the changes that have been recommended.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant or for Benjamin?
This is Ruth Holstrom. I just had a clarification point. It says that the zoning code section 29.402, subsection 2, 3 already allows a porch to encroach by 8 feet into the front setback. A porch is defined as being open. Now, does that mean that the porch could be covered or uncovered, or what is, I guess, in terms of defining open? I'm just curious what that means.
Yeah, the porch is, by definition, the porch is covered. If there's no roof over it, then it's not a porch. And, flat work does not have a setback. So a patio, for instance, it's just concrete. It doesn't count for the sake of a porch. So if you had it only, I believe our definition is, and I don't have it right in front of me, I could look it up, but I believe it's only one wall that needs to be open. So if you had, sometimes you'll see in houses, it'll be kind of a niche that's kind of carved back into the house and one wall is open, and that is considered a porch.
So essentially it means it can't be enclosed with glass or screens. It needs to look like what you think a porch looks like to be allowed for that projection.
Correct. Thanks, Kelly.
Other questions?
I have one.
Sure, John.
Okay. I believe it's lot 23 that abuts to the edge of the property. Is that eave overhanging off the property to the west?
No, let me zoom in here. No, that house will be set back 8 feet from its property line. The PRD standards in the zoning ordinance require that setbacks around the perimeter of the development mirror those of the base district. And so this is a single family base district, and so for in RL and FSRL, the side setback for a single family home is 6 feet if it's a single story home and 8 feet if it's a 2-story home. And so out of an abundance of caution, the developer has agreed to put an 8-foot setback there in the chance that that home could have a second story.
Okay, so that the big change was between lot 22 and 23, right? That's what the eave overhang was?
The eave overhang is the eaves are on all of the houses.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah, but the only difference between lots 22 and 23 is that the 10 feet of distance will not be maintained. Everywhere else, the 10 feet of separation between the homes, which was the original plan, which is typical in all single family developments, it will be 9 feet here. And to compensate for the less than 10 feet, the applicant is going to be fire rating the west wall of the home on lot 22 and the east walls of the home on lot 23.
And those are the two model homes?
Lot 22 is, yes.
Lot 22 is, okay.
Any additional questions? Do we have any public members wanting to comment on this item?
As a reminder to those that are watching online, if you use the raise hand function, I will unmute you to speak on this item. If you're a call-in listener, if you hit *9, it will also alert me that you're interested in speaking on this item. So I'll wait a minute to see if anybody wants to speak. Right now, there are no hands raised. So Carol, I don't see anybody raising their hand to speak on this item.
Thank you, Kelly. In that case, we'll close the public hearing. Is there any conversation amongst the commissioners before I ask for a motion? In that case, I would ask for a motion on item 6, which is a major site development plan amendment for the Damani Planned Resident District at 2200 Oakwood Road.
This is Doug. I'll make a motion that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that City Council approve the major site development plan amended for Damani to modify setbacks and building separation requirements as described in this report with the following conditions. Condition A, proceed with a boundary line adjustment prior to issuance of building permits for additional lots in the development. And item B, include notes on the major site development plan restricting placement of accessory structures.
Clayton,
Thank you, Doug. Who is the second?
Clayton.
All right, Mike. So we have a motion and a second to approve the item listed as number 6 on your agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, please say nay. Item passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 6, or excuse me, number 7, is public hearing for the major site development plan, alternative landscape plan for 1910 Isaac Newton Drive. And Benjamin, are you going to present this one also?
Julie Gould will be coming online here for this one.
Okay, that will be great. Julie?
Good evening.
Good evening.
It says I'm disabled I can't share, so I don't.
Okay. I'll bring it up, Julie, and then I'll try to do it shortly.
Okay. So this site plan is at 1910 Isaac Newton Drive. It's a newly created lot that was part of a plat approved earlier this summer on the northwest corner of Southeast 16th and Dayton Drive. The applicant, just for clarification, in case anybody's confused, the company name is Quick Trip, but the store name will be Quick Star. In case anybody was curious why the applicant's name did not match the name on the plans. This is a 3.7 acre site, and it's zoned HOC highway oriented commercial, and it's also located within the Southeast Gateway overlay. The significance of that gateway overlay, there's some architectural requirements, some site requirements, and some landscaping requirements. The landscaping requirements in this overlay are limited to planting types. They need to be native to Iowa and on one of our approved lists for this overlay, which all of the plants and trees that they are including meet those requirements. Typically, this would be a minor site plan approval, and it would just go to staff for approval, and it wouldn't come before the commission. But they worked with staff, and we were unable to meet all the landscaping requirements. So they're before you tonight with requesting approval of an alternative landscape plan. They do comply with their front yard landscaping. That's true, which is a combination of trees and shrubs and grasses, and you're allowed to substitute in some perennials, which they're doing as well. Unfortunately, you can't double count a tree, so a front yard tree has to only be counted as a front yard tree. It cannot be counted as a front yard and a parking lot tree. As you can see in the site plan, it does have a lot of paving. Of the 3.7 acres, 2.5 acres is actually paved. That is because there is, you see a typical gas station layout on the eastern half of the site. The canopy is between the building and Isaac Newton Drive. On the south side of the building, between the building and Southeast 16th, there will be a car wash. Parking located along the east property line. What's unique is it is similar to across the street at the Come and Go, where there's semi parking, allowing for semi trailer parking, and then a diesel fueling canopy as well. So typically a commercial parking lot layout, you'll have aisles of parking with islands. And so it's easy to get those parking lot trees in, which are required to be overstory and shade pavement. Because of how the size of semis and the circulation of the site, it was difficult to put trees in some of the required areas or the allowed areas to be counted as a parking lot tree. And the requirement, that calculation for parking lot trees would have required 50 trees. So you can see there's definitely more than 50 trees on this site. There's actually, in addition to the front yard trees, there's another 62 trees on site, a combination of ornamental and the overstory. But of those overstories that were provided, only 22 can actually be counted as a parking lot tree because of its proximity to the pavement and shading it would actually provide. So really, they're complying with all the landscaping requirements except for that parking lot overstory tree requirement. They worked with staff, the developer worked with staff, and we looked at lots of different options, tree types, placements, things like that. And this is the closest we could get. We think it meets the intent in order to even be approved as an alternative landscape plan. The code says that it needs to be unique or high quality landscape environment. But it does allow flexibility in creating landscaping treatments based on design constraints. And so we feel the site is complying with that as much as possible. So staff is recommending approval of this alternative landscape plan.
Thank you. Do we have a representative of the applicant here tonight to speak?
We do. So I'm going to unmute Wade.
Hi, my name's Wade Dumont. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you, Wade.
Okay. Would you like me to address you now, or did you want to ask questions of staff first?
Why don't you now? And then we'll ask questions both of you.
Sounds good. Madam Chair and Commission members, my name is Wade Dumont. I'm with Quick Trip out of La Crosse, Wisconsin. In Iowa, we are known as Quick Star because there's an existing company called Quick Trip with a Q, mainly in the Des Moines area. So we had to come up with a different name. So that's the reason for the different names that you'll see on the applications. And I do want to thank staff, both Julie and Kelly. They have done a lot of work with us as we've tried to wrestle through the landscape portion of this plan. The hardest part was we've got 3 frontages on this lot, as you can see in the kind of the purplish blue color, and you can't have an overlap of the parking lot area, which is green, the parking lot landscape area, which is green, and then the front yard areas, which are the purplish blue. And so that ended up creating the need for the substantial number of trees. So we tried to get as many on there that would meet the criteria for both of those areas. And what you have before you is what we proposed. And again, we've been working with Julie quite a bit. So she's helped us out and figuring out the requirements and what is needed to be done here. So I can answer more specific questions if you have questions, but I will I'll make myself available for questions as are needed. Thank you.
Are there questions of staff or the applicant from the commission?
This is Ruth Holstrom. I was just curious. So what is the general, movement of semi trucks on the site? I just kind of want to better understand in terms of where trees couldn't be placed due to potential movements of the semi trucks. So how generally, are semi trucks anticipated to move on the site?
The semi traffic is going to be coming off of Dayton, and it'll be taking a left, mainly from Highway 30 heading north on Dayton, and then they take a left onto Isaac Newton heading west. And they would enter at that first access point and going to the small diesel island. There's 2 stalls, yep, right in that location. And they would head south through that diesel island and then curve around to the west and then back up north. And then they would back into those parking stalls if they were going to stay. And then they would exit the site at that farthest west access point. And the reason we plan it that way is so that those trucks, when they exit the site, are as far as possible from the intersection of Dayton and Isaac Newton, so that they're not competing with the other traffic that's moving. But also the biggest thing is so they have enough stacking ability, so that they're not getting in the way of other traffic, so they can stack up well at that Dayton intersection. Most of them will be heading back towards the highway, since that's where we're anticipating most of them will come from. And so that'll be a right turn onto Dayton, which makes it pretty easy for them to exit the development to keep traffic from being, too impactful for everything else that's happening in that area.
That helps, thank you. So I guess to staff that, I was curious in terms of what's required for landscaping in the front yard due to the overlay district. Is there the possibility of swapping out understory trees for overstory trees? I definitely understand the constraints of the existing site, but I wonder, like, specifically kind of along the eastern edge of the property, kind of northeast, where there's some vehicular parking. There's understory trees shown there, but I don't know if potentially some of those could be swapped out, and even though they wouldn't technically count towards the pavement shading, they would still provide pavement shading. I don't know if that was discussed at all between the applicant and staff.
Oh yeah, we did. So it was really kind of a puzzle and kind of a math game, if you will. So the code only I don't have it in front of me. I apologize. Maybe Kelly knows the exact number, but the code only allows up to a certain amount of ornamental trees to be swapped out for overstory trees, and they are doing that along in this section. It's kind of hard to see on this plan, but there's some ornamental trees here, and 2 ornamental trees count for 1 overstory tree, and then there's a couple up here. And so they've maxed out their substitution for front yard trees that they, as much as they could, code would allow, and so the rest is overstory.
And Ruth, so the overlay is really unique. It wanted an applicant to cluster trees and plantings together and not necessarily make uniform rows of landscaping like we see in many places in Ames. So I think the applicant tried to do that on the south side of the property, and then where that northeast kind of corner that you pointed out, which has the smaller trees and a lot of grasses and some perennials. There's nothing saying, because we're in this alternative landscape plan, that they couldn't bring back overstory trees into those areas. But at the time when they developed this, they were trying to address the overlay idea of a clustering.
Okay, I definitely understand the need to meet, obviously, the what's required for the overlay. How about kind of in the north, I guess, east corner? There's a little green strip right behind what could be maybe a monument sign. I'm not really sure.
So the basic answer, Ruth, is that because of the plan that we're reviewing with you, the true numerical compliance is not necessitated. That's just part of the alternative landscape plan. So if there was a reason to have larger trees somewhere on the site, that could be recommended to the applicant and see how that works with the spacing requirements that we have.
Okay, so we could essentially suggest to take this landscape back to staff and work with them on potentially looking at other places to place overstory trees. Is that?
We did that several times.
Yeah, I don't think that between Julie and myself and Wade that there's not really places to put more unless you were to change out what's proposed already. And that's kind of why you see what's here. This was probably 3 or 4 iterations to get to this.
I think, Rose, where you're talking about or Ruth, sorry, where you're talking about specifically, we did talk with the applicant and their landscape architect, you know, and some of it came down to visibility of their storefront as well. But we looked at, and they did substitute overstories where we asked them to in other locations.
And the applicant does have his hand raised. He can also respond to the question.
Wade Dumont again. Yeah, that is the main reason why there's not a huge number of trees in that specific corner, because that's the main intersection into the site. Also, there's, I believe, a site visibility triangle we've got to maintain. But the main reason for that is trying to make sure we maintain some visibility, because all along the eastern edge right now, other than that corner, really has no visibility because of all the trees in and along that frontage specifically. So that was one of the reasons in trying to keep that open just a little bit there, to be able to have people be able to see if there are fueling positions available. People need to see that. A lot of times if people can't see that, they get really frustrated, as well as parking spaces. So we wanted at least to be able to address those concerns that a lot of customers have when they're driving by, to be able to try to see into the site to see if there's availability of services. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. I have one other question, but I want to give an opportunity to other commission members first to ask questions if they have them.
I do have one.
Hey, John.
Yes, you're proposing to put honey locust in on this site?
Yes, there are some honey locusts on the site.
Do you realize honey locusts have thorns? 3-inch thorns?
This is Wade Dumont, if you can hear me.
Yes.
I believe it's going to be the enormous type. I'm actually a landscape architect myself. I'm licensed in the state of Minnesota. And yes, I'm looking at because it is Gladitia tricanthos. It does not say enormous, but it does say common honey locust, and that is typically the thornless. I have not seen any Gladitias like that with thorns planted for. I've never seen them planted. I don't know if you have in the area, but that's not the intent, sir.
Yes, we do have them around here, very much so.
Okay.
Then the Gladisius, that it is known as the thorny locust, or the thorn tree.
There is a variety, which as Wade pointed out, that doesn't have the thorns, and that's what their intent is to plant. It's one of the trees that meets the overlay requirements for a native or a prairie-based landscaping theme.
Yeah, they're nasty trees. The ones with the thorns are nasty trees, and I think all the locust trees shed those pods terribly. Used to work with my brother on a tree service, and they're not fun to work around.
I would have to agree with you, sir. That was not the intent. We'll make sure those are thornless.
It's because otherwise there's probability of tire punctures and injury to the public.
Yeah, they're huge thorns, like you said.
Oh yes.
Ruth, you said you had another question.
Yeah, I was curious, the come and go that's to the east, is that also part of the overlay district? And did they have to meet the same requirements for landscaping as this site is obviously needing to meet?
That site was developed before the overlay, and their semi-parking area was an addition later as well. So that's why you see a difference between the sites and what's expected landscaping wise.
It's nowhere near the requirements that are on this site, Ruth. The current landscape code was adopted about 3 years ago, and I think the come and go across the street is pre-2005.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Thanks for the clarification.
Any other commissioner questions? Do we have anybody in the audience who would like to comment on this proposal?
So as I said earlier, if you're a call-in person, *9 should give you a raise hand function. And if you're watching online, there's a raise hand as a choice also. I'll give it a second, Carol. I'm not seeing any indication of a raised hand.
All right, thank you, Kelly. In that case, we will close the public hearing for the major site development plan, alternative landscape plan for 1910 Isaac Newton Drive. Is there discussion amongst the commission members on this item?
Kelly, we're not talking about. We're just talking about the landscaping, correct?
Right. So the scope of the review is literally the configuration of landscaping and its materials and its location on the site.
Okay.
Hearing no further discussion, I'm open to a motion to approve the proposed major site development plan, alternative landscape plan for 1910 Isaac Newton Drive.
This is Doug. I'll make a motion that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the City Council approve the major site development plan, alternative landscape plan, 1910 Isaac Newton Drive.
Thank you, Doug. Do we have a second? Do we have a second to this motion?
This is Anu. I will second.
Thank you, Anu. We have a motion and a second to approve this major site development plan. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, please indicate by saying nay. Item 7 passes. Thank you. Item number 8 is zoning text amendment for a new East Industrial Zoning District. Kelly, are you going to present this evening?
Yeah, I'll introduce it. I also have Justin Moore here who worked on drafting this.
Great.
So as an introduction, we have an area that we call the East Industrial Expansion Area, but it's now marketed under the Prairie View Industrial Center, and it's south of the railroad tracks, east of I-35. Most people would think it's essentially centered on Lincoln Way, going through that area. The city has annexed this about 5 years ago, and we're in the process of doing an infrastructure extension of water and sewer in the next year. We're in design and we'll go out to bid later this winter for those utility extensions. And as we get that into place, that lets us really pursue the economic development goals that we have for the area. So the Ames Economic Development Commission sent a request to City Council to say, as we're moving forward in this time where we're trying to market this area, we really need to look at getting the zoning in place so those questions are answered about how things will be done once the utilities are out there. And the zoning district we're proposing is a new district rather than amending standards of our existing 3 districts. The existing districts kind of deal with situations that are slightly different than this, and staff was most comfortable because of the large amount of area that's out here and its distinct approach about railroad and highway access, that we look at it as a new district rather than changing standards that would affect other parts of town. And really what you see in front of you is an industrial district that allows the broadest range of uses, the most intense type of industrial uses in the city, and is really sized to think about large sites, whether they're distribution or logistics facilities or they're manufacturing and production facilities. It's not really designed to be small business parks or small kind of contractor spaces. That's not really the intent. That's stuff that you would see in other parts of general industrial in the city. But out here, it's really designed to have larger development options for major facilities. So that's why you see a fairly large minimum lot size. You've seen that we have substantial frontage requirements for lots that are created. And then the unique features that are really kind of at the request of these larger industrial users that we've heard and through conversations with the AEDC is to allow for taller buildings than we have in other places of the city. Their other zones have a 100-foot height limit. Out here, we're proposing a 150-foot base height allowance, but also to allow for a 50-foot extension above that for appurtenances on buildings. And the reason that comes into play is that not production facilities, manufacturing, they often can have different needs that aren't just uniform like an office building or a warehouse. And we want to have some flexibility to deal with either high bays that are necessary for a manufacturing process or to deal with cooling towers or emissions that come from stacks that need to be placed on the site in different ways. So this is, again, not just the uses are intense, but it does allow for larger buildings than what you may have in other parts of the city. And we pointed out in the report that Barilla was built pre-2000, so it was in a different zoning code in a different industrial district back then. But it does give you a sense of probably the facility size, some of the features that you might expect to see on other developed properties out here in the future. The parts of the Barilla facility are well over 100 feet. They got variances back in the 90s to do that. And then you see other parts of the site, how they have manufacturing and they have office and they have storage and distribution abilities with their for their trucks on the site as well. So what we're looking at is a recommendation on creating the zoning district. Once that is done, then the city council will decide whether to initiate rezoning of property or wait for development requests to come in and look at what the facility needs are and how they fit with the zoning request in the future. So tonight we're really just talking about the standards. A separate hearing process will occur to apply the zoning in the future. And Justin, did you want to add anything else about the zoning district or the standards?
No, I think you pretty much covered it and hit on all the main points. As you'll probably see, just to kind of add to that, between the permitted and restricted uses, you'll see most of the permitted uses are what you can find in other industrial zones in the community, particularly GI, general industrial, which is west of I-35. But we do have some specific uses that we are restricting out here. We are not proposing to permit salvage yards. And also to clarify on rail, just a little bit more for everyone listening or watching, rail yards, standalone rail yards would not be permitted out here. Rather, you could, though, have a transload facility or a rail spur to serve a business directly. So we do obviously allow the expansion of rail lines, but an actual standalone rail yard for itself would not be permitted. And another thing to clarify too is a standalone office building would not be permitted. But if there's a company that has an industrial process out here, they certainly could have a large office presence. So it's pretty permissive of some things that we can't cite currently easily in the city, but we do have things obviously that we restrict as well to guide the sort of future growth and the vision of this area.
Thank you, Justin. Do we have any commission questions of the staff at this point?
Yes, John Emery here. There's nothing, so they could have a TOFC, COFC loading facility in this area, correct?
Yeah, they could transload facility would be able to fit in this particular district. And that would specifically involve, I'm sure as you know, but for those who may not, freight that is trucked in and transported onto train or off of train onto trucks. So that has a specific intent, but it's a rail yard such as the assembling or creation of trains just for the sole purpose of would not be permitted.
Not a classification yard, but they could have, say, 4 tracks in there that they use for unloading trailer on flat cars, container on flat cars.
Correct.
Yeah, I think it's I think yes is the answer, and where the line is on exactly how that definition would distinguish it from rail yards and where the gray area is there, that's something you probably have to sort out when a request comes in. It's clearly not our goal to have that low of an intensity of use. It is not our goal to use up the resources and utility extensions we're making to have large open areas that don't serve a
manufacturing.
Yeah, manufacturing or some intensity of building out here that needs utilities.
Okay.
Other questions for staff?
This is Ruth Holstrom. I was curious, the height, I just want for a point of clarification. So the standard height maximum is 150 feet, but then below that in the lower paragraph, it talks about staff proposing essentially to allow taller features up to 50 feet. So essentially these other features could be upwards of 200 feet tall. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions?
Hi, this is Anu. I don't have a question, but more of sort of something that I'm observing. It's interesting that the AEDC is proposing, or rather asking to move something that's more of an industrial kind of zone to accommodate uses, which the reason I'm a little surprised, I guess, is because we seem to be moving away from manufacturing overall in general across the country so much, because that's something that has we moved away from large scale manufacturing quite a bit, because that's just the direction the economy's been taking. So to me, it's an interesting move, but I think given that AEDC is proposing this, I assume there is some long-term intent and goals for that area and the kind of uses the city would like to see in that space. So just curious about that. Besides that, I think I don't necessarily have questions. I'm just curious what kind of uses might come through. I see the list of permitted uses, but even with that, it would be nice to sort of have some kind of examples of what these uses look like. And also, I quite appreciate the restricted uses that are listed in there. I think that would go a long way in sort of keeping some sort of control in the kind of businesses or industries that do come up.
Do we have anyone listening in who has a comment on this item?
As I've said with the other items, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand in the Zoom meeting, or if you're calling in, you can do *9. I know there's an attendee. I'm not sure if they want to speak or not that are interested in this item, so we'll see if that comes up. Yeah, so I have Dan Culhane representing Ames Chamber of Commerce and the AEDC that would like to speak.
Certainly, go ahead.
All right, Dan, you're open. Just unmute yourself. There you go.
Good evening. This is Dan Culhane with the Ames Economic Development Commission. Yes, actually, we've had a number of manufacturing clients that have expressed interest in this corridor a bit prematurely because the sewer and water has not been deployed at this point in time. We had one in particular that would have built close to 1.5 million square feet of manufacturing space. And one of the things that Kelly was very helpful with was the company had a stack or a guess a smokestack is what you call it, that would have been in excess of 200 feet. And so we are seeing projects like this because of the size and scale of Prairie View Industrial Center. Furthermore, with the rail access that sits out there, that makes it also a very attractive site for large-scale industrial, which is why the latitude that Kelly and his team have placed inside this distinction is very helpful, we believe, going forward.
Thank you, Dan.
I think this is Anu here again. I had a side question, and thank you for that explanation, Dan. A side question, does the city have some kind of an order board or some setup or system where we address odor kind of issues?
What do you mean by order?
It just randomly, okay, just thinking through, like looking at some of those permitted uses, and I'm thinking of Des Moines. Des Moines has these soy-based plants and some other sort of industrial uses on the east side and northeast side. And I know the citizens have several times raised concerns of some of the odor issues in there. And there was an odor board that kind of keeps track of some of these concerns, and there are kind of limits placed on, I don't know the technical words and the numbers that they follow, but there are certain thresholds that they have to meet, and if they're over it, then that particular industrial unit or whatever is cited and asked to bring that order down. Just going in the direction we are going with this zoning district, and with the zoning district, I'm trying to figure out if that is something that we need to think about at all, or do we have something in place already and we don't need to worry about it?
There's definitely no board like that in Ames. The only thing at the end of the standards, there's under site development plan requirements, there's a list which is unique to industrial zones in Ames that you have to kind of give us an operations report. And you'll see that odor is one of the things listed there as a consideration. But once the plant is built, there isn't necessarily an operating standard that's in the municipal code that you could hold somebody to, and there's no board to review complaints for that. So either it would have to be addressed up front at the time of approval, or there isn't anything in the municipal code for odor.
And given that situation, I'm all for this move right now, but given that situation, I think that is just something to keep on our radar and figure out how we may want to address any possible issues in the future.
Thank you, Anu.
And John Emery.
Yes, John.
Yeah, I agree with Anu. I've ran into, one of my runs used to be into Clinton, and we talked about, we call Clinton the city of seven smells. You'd have so much odor out there. You had ADM and national byproducts, Sethnus, and they also have particulate that comes out of ADM, so it's almost a rain that'll take the finish right off a car. And you should think about that too whenever you get to filling in the industry out here. I realize that the prevailing winds are from the west to the east and the north to the south, but that's it.
I would think that during the application process, from any specific potential manufacturing, those kinds of questions would and could be brought up. What's your take on that, Kelly? Oops, I lost him.
So this is Justin. I certainly think it is something, and I'll just kind of step in quick for Kelly. Again, as Kelly mentioned earlier, during the site plan review process with staff, there are things, at least specifically in our language there on the utility end, that we can look at. But there can also be things that are looked at up front as far as for example, something like particulate, as our development review committee reviews it. That's certainly a question that could be dealt with at that time, provided that we know, the full extent of the manufacturing activity, which we should.
Yeah, I think it's not something we have a lot of experience with, so I can't point to how that'll turn out. All I can point at is those site development plan requirements that we do have this checklist to start the conversation with the user and to try to probably mitigate as best as possible. But that's the extent of how I think it's structured in our current industrial standards.
You might want to take a trip out to Clinton sometime to see what I'm talking about out there. It's give you a heads up on what happens out there. It'll take your breath away at times.
Thank you.
This is Ruth Holstrom. I guess I have one additional question for staff. I was just curious, based on the scenario development concepts that were shown for the growth areas with the Ames Plan 2040, how that kind of fits in with kind of the proposed, new district the new district that's being proposed here. I don't know if anyone can provide any. I know those are all scenarios, but I'm just curious, based on the scenarios that were proposed, how staff feels like that fits into this potential new district.
Unmute, Kelly. Nope.
Okay, I'm bringing up a map just a second. So this is the zoning map that we have, or I'm sorry, it's the land use map. What Ruth is talking about is the Prairie View Industrial Center was a given as employment in all scenarios for Ames Plan 2040 analysis. We had an east growth scenario that looked at essentially having residential north of 220th Street and along 570th and 580th in this area up here. And it was to be kind of developed at the same time as commercial development occurred that's planned in this area over here. And then south of 220th Street, there is already some industrial zone land, but it was kind of, it was shown as not residential, but some version of transitional industrial or commercial space there. Clearly the use that we're talking about, it's probably about a quarter mile away from any future residential. It's that residential there was a small component that was included in the calculations of the 15,000 people when council selected the preferred tiers. It is going to be definitely larger buildings would be visible from that area. I think your comments about odor, if that was to be the case, then that could definitely be a detriment to future residential in that area. And then I think the city would probably have to pivot from that and think about what else might be appropriate in that corridor along 220th, if that's really the outcome of the Prairie View Industrial Center, is for industrial uses that are not probably compatible or maybe even desirable enough to be marketable residential land. And if that's the case, then that lets us really go back to the south, the west, and the north tiers of growth and really focus on those areas as build out rather than the east. Does that kind of address what you're asking, Ruth?
Yeah, that's exactly. I had some concerns again because of what's being proposed potentially here, and then just looking at what the kind of proposed kind of scenarios were for potential development, and that again because there was residential uses obviously within that, how this could potentially impact that possible scenario.
I would not disagree that on that list of allowed uses, there are definitely uses you don't see in Ames that are more noxious. And if that is what materializes out here, I think the city would probably reconsider how residential fits north of the tracks. If it's plants that don't have that kind of environment, if it's things like Barilla that, yeah, they're large, but they don't really have activities that you really notice on a frequent basis, then I think the residential could still work north of 220th Street.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yep.
Other questions? Kelly, are there any additional folks wanting to speak in the public hearing on this? Can't hear you.
I don't have any other raised hands right now.
All right, thank you. In that case, we'll close the public hearing on the zoning text amendment for a new East Industrial Zoning District. Is there conversation amongst commissioners on this item?
This is Ruth Holstrom. I guess I'm just curious what other commission members think about the possibility of, again, that scenario growth area that we were looking at potentially not necessarily being a great option for residential. If that's a concern to other commission members, should obviously this area build out in a way that I guess is not conducive to having residential located nearby.
If they start to build residential up there, I think the city is obligated to protect them from particulate and odor from the industrial park that they're proposing.
I hear you, Ruth. I had actually not considered how the growth scenario, how that would fit in. But the more I'm thinking of this, I wonder if this is something that it makes me think of where the comprehensive plan is at and how that fits in with this, both in terms of how it fits in physically as well as in terms of timing. And Kelly, maybe you might be able to help think this through a little bit.
Well, in terms of timing, Prairie View was on the table before Ames Plan 2040 was on the table. So in terms of priorities, I think it's very clear Prairie View is a higher priority than the East Growth scenario, which was created last year. This is where I don't disagree. It's if the residential was there today, I think you would have a totally different perspective on this site. If you think that the industrial is the one that will come first, which seems very likely, there isn't really traction for housing to just appear on the east side of I-35 right now. I think we'll have to adapt and react to that and see if it really makes sense to continue that as residential. But the priority is the Prairie View industrial area over the East Growth scenario, and as I understand it at this point. And we're in the formatting or the drafting of the final plan. It is not yet adopted, but I think it's pretty clear that what we've looked at is where council wanted to finalize the plan on for public comment.
Thank you, Kelly.
Kelly, so there's probably not anything like going back and kind of revisiting where the residential might be located for that growth area, or I guess I'm not entirely sure how kind of finalized some of the comp plan stuff is at this point. So there's residential that we ended up breaking things into tiers. Tier 1 was immediately abutting the city or readily developable. Tier 2 was readily developable with some infrastructure extensions. And we identified those types of areas in all 4 directions of the city. The bulk of the growth was the build out of the north in the area south of 190th Street, kind of that area along Hyde that's building out now. And then the real expansion kind of new things were south on Highway 69 and west. There was a small amount in this east area, but it was really still predicated on the idea that commercial development happens and that would be the reason that this area would become marketable for housing. We don't support that housing be the pioneer use out here. We think it only works if it's in combination with other things that occur that kind of build a community on this side of the interstate. So I understand kind of what you're saying is essentially the way that you're viewing it as the kind of this East Growth area were to build out in the commercial development, then residential could potentially follow But it's not to say if things with obviously the Prairie View Industrial Center, if they go a certain direction in terms of build out, it might not end up being, for residential builders, it might not end up being an area that is conducive to residential use.
I think that's a possible outcome, yes. And what I'm trying to get to is that the plan did not hinge on the East Growth scenario supplying the bulk of our housing needs into the future. So that's one reason why I think we can kind of have this wait and see approach here, because we identified the other three areas for housing to meet both the immediate and the midterm needs of the city.
No, but I appreciate that, Kelly. That's some beneficial information. So thank you.
Welcome.
Are we having somebody that's really, truly looking at this, or is this is just trying to a way to market Ames more?
For the industrial or for the housing?
Industrial.
I think that's where Mr. Culhane addressed that Alliant Energy has spent a lot of money getting this set up in the state's economic development program, so it's marketable on national level of site selectors. And as Dan said, that there is interest in the site. We have competitive properties with highway access, and then some properties with rail access. There's only going to be a couple with rail access. Highway access to Highway 30 and I-35 is also appealing. So it's always a chicken and the egg. If you don't have utilities, no one's ever going to build there. No one's going to wait for the city to get around to designing and extending utilities. So until we get those in the ground next year, we don't know how far and how competitive we'll be all the way to the end in these site selection exercises.
Going to have to build that with sewer line too first?
Yeah, so water and sewer has to be in. No developer is going to wait to see. No large user is going to be waiting to see if the city will build a half a mile of sewer to serve their site.
Right, you're talking about a pump station, or what did you call it? That was north of the tracks.
So the water and sewer is all going to be in the Lincoln Way right of way, and there is a lift station on the Lincoln Way roadway to make the sanitary sewer work. Yes.
Yes, but you were talking about going down south to South Ames with a brand new high volume line we talked about.
Yeah, so there's two tiers. The city is investing in the water and sewer in Lincoln Way to bring the water out and take the sewer back into the city, and that'll serve a certain amount of acreage. But the very long-term build out of either north of the tracks or the further expansion south of the tracks would necessitate another trunk line to go south to the treatment plant. But we have a fairly healthy amount of capacity by doing the investment we're planning to make next year.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, I would open up for a motion on the zoning text amendment for a new East Industrial Zoning District. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we adapt. It is an alternative one. Recommend that City Council adopt a new industrial zoning district for the Prairie View Industrial Center based on the proposed draft standards.
Thank you. Do I have a second for that motion?
This is Ruth Holstrom. I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor of this text amendment indicate by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, please indicate by saying nay. And this motion passes. Thank you. That's the last of our formal agenda items. Do we have any commissioner comments this evening?
I'll have a couple, but I'll let the commission go first.
I do agree that we need to promote manufacturing in this country and in around Ames to serve something other than Iowa State. And I think it's a wonderful idea as long as it's controlled, like I said about the odors and the particulate matter. Just hope we do that.
Thank you. Any other commission comments? Kelly, you have a couple of comments you said.
Yeah, I do. I would say on that last item, I think that was a very good discussion by the commission because there's a lot of different factors at play. Ames Plan 2040 is not adopted. To bring that back into the conversation is important, and to really kind of understand the interplay of a lot of these issues. It's not often that we're talking about 1,200 acre areas of a city and the tone that you're setting by establishing a zoning district. So that's a good conversation and discussion. I think it'll be valuable to the council to be able to have us recount that to them as well. But on to other business, it looks like we probably will not have a planning and zoning commission the first week of January. I don't think we have agenda items that are going to be ready. But one thing that we are planning to do at the next time that we do have a meeting is discuss new residential small lot zoning standards with you. City Council has a goal of increasing housing variety and diversity within the city, and that meant addressing zoning issues that affect that option for people. So much like the Damani project that you discussed tonight, how can we facilitate or streamline those approaches to get more housing variety? So we had a staff report for City Council, and we had a developer outreach meeting this fall, and we have some direction from council to move forward on a zoning text amendment. But before we get into writing that, we wanted to review the issue with you to give you some background education, and then we'll come back with the text amendment for you to review after that. So in January, we will want to go through that issue with you. And the other thing that you may have seen council move forward on last week was the idea of pursuing a reinvestment district application, where the city is looking at leveraging development on Lincoln Way through a state program to look at developing an indoor aquatic center on Lincoln Way, as well as working with some downtown plaza development in coordination with those three projects. So the commission doesn't have a role directly in that reinvestment application, but some of those projects, especially the Lincoln Way project, has a potential to come before the commission, and it's something that we're just now starting, and it has a February deadline. So it will be moving very quickly to get these pre-application materials complete. And then there will be time, if we do succeed in our request to the state, to then refine materials and go back for final approval. But there will be some public meetings at the middle and end of January to talk about the pool, and as well as a plaza downtown. So that's just kind of for your education or information as the city moves forward here fairly quickly on the reinvestment district application.
That's helpful. Thank you. At this point, I would welcome a motion for adjournment.
Move adjournment.
Have a second.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your input tonight.
Yeah. Have a good night.
Thank you.